Keith, I want to let you know, man, that you got all the information right about the various albums that I have out, playing with George Smith, and my influences. You might want to put down that Big Walter Horton was the influence on me when I first started. Actually, it was Big Walter when I very first started, when I was 16. It was Big Walter Horton and Junior Wells, and I actually didn't hear Little Walter stuff until a couple years later, so at first I was definitely more influenced by Junior Wells and Big Walter, and then a little bit later George Smith and then Little Walter. So, but all the stuff about my records, you got all that information correct. So I'm going to go on to your questions now.
Okay, first off, obligatory question here. What type of equipment do you use?
Well, what I use all Hohner harmonicas. I use the Marine Band harps. The wood seems to make a difference for me in the tone. It's true that they leak air, but to me it's a small sacrifice. You get that right kind of sound, and it seems to come from the wood. I definitely don't soak my harps. I don't believe in that because you have to continue to soak them, and then the life of the harps is real short. They don't last too long. So I use Marine Band harmonicas. I don't use no plastic harps. That's for the diatonic. For the chromatic, I use the Hohner 270. And it's a 12-home model. And I'm able to cup it real tight with my hands. And also comes in all different keys. The one I use mostly is the C chromatic. And the B flat also. Actually, maybe at this point in time, I'm using maybe the B flat more than the C, but I do play both. I do have both of them. For microphones, what I have is I've got a static mics and Shure Green Bullet mics, both of them. But I've got a real old Green Bullet that was given to me many years back, but it's an old one now. It was made in 1950, and my brother-in-law gave it to me. I got it kind of by accident. So what I did is, the Green Bullet to me is actually, the body is too heavy, and I just don't like the way it feels. But I really dig the way it sounds. So what I did is I took the microphone element, the cartridge, out of my Green Bullet, and I cut down the rubber part that's right around the element. I cut that down a little bit, and I put it inside in a static JT30 body. So what I have there is the sound of a real old Green Bullet and the looks of an static. Most people think I play in a static mic, and that's not true. It's a real old Green Bullet. And also, I think there's a big difference between the Green Bullet mics that they make right now and, say, 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, and I have a real old one, and I think that's what makes the difference when you compare them. So anyhow, I really dig it like that. It's a Green Bullet mic inside an static body. And I used to have statics, and they sounded pretty good, but to me, and for what I do, I feel like I have the ideal mic. I might tell you the first static that I ever did own, a young man from Chicago, he's a harmonica player, singer, and producer, Shaky Jake Harris. He sold me my first mic, and it really gave me a lot of inspiration to have it. At the time, I had never had an static or any kind of harmonica mic like that. I've never had one before. And I really thought, I was real young and green, and I thought that the mic would make me sound like some of the great harp players that I was digging. He told me, and he put it in a real nice way. He says, this mic will not make you sound great, but it might give you the confidence to go on to greatness later on. It just might give you the confidence, but the mic in itself won't make you play better. And I think he was right. I think he said the right thing. And just by being around Shaky Jake also really was really good for me. Really inspired me. He gave me confidence and set me off in the right direction. For amplifier, I got a Fender Bassman amp, and it was made in 1960. And to me, the Bassmans just cannot be beat for the harmonica. They just got a great, great big sound. And it has 4 10-inch speakers and 50 watts. And they're getting pretty hard to find. I've had mine now for about 10 years. And I really, really like the sound of that Bassman. when I go out of town and I have to use other equipment, like if I fly into different cities and I don't take my own amp, I really miss my basement. And I also use an effect. It's a Maestro Echo unit, runs on a tape. It's kind of like a tape recorder, you know. A sound goes into it and reproduces that same sound, and I don't put too much echo on my harp, but just a very little bit, and that helps give you a bigger sound also, and that's a Maestro Echoplex. So I guess that's about it for my equipment. Let me go on to your next question.
Now, another thing I was curious about, other than Junior Wells and Little Walter, what other early influences prior to Harmonica Smith would you say influenced you a great deal?
Some of my influences, before I got under George Smith's spell, that happened a few years later, was Big Walter Horton and Junior Wells. Out here in Los Angeles in the 60s, when I was just getting started, they would play a lot of blues on the radio mixed up with all different kinds of music, and it was real good because that would turn all kinds of people on to blues that had never even heard it before. Didn't even know what blues was, some people, you know, until they heard it mixed up with some other kind of stuff, you know. And in those days, they were playing a lot of Big Walter and Junior Wells on the radio, and there was one record in particular. It was one record of a 3 LP set. It's called Chicago, the Blues Today, and it came out on the Vanguard record label in the 60s. And I think Junior Wells and also Big Walter, Big Walter was with Johnny Shines and Johnny Young on the one record I'm talking about. Junior Wells was with Buddy Guy on his little thing. But man, them two records to me was real important. I mean, I just studied them things, man, like a college student in the 60s, you know. And then Junior and Big Walter, they would come to town, and I'd go down and see them, and they were big heroes of mine. And Junior Wells in particular, I idolized him when I was a teenager. Like when I'd be 16 and stuff. I remember going around town and writing his name on fences and stuff, saying Junior is the king, you know. And all my friends, they would listen to that psychedelic rock music, but I was all the way in, man, to blues, Junior Wells, and things like that. When I was younger, and even when I was older, and even today, but when I was younger, my mom used to play a lot of swing records, you know, and boogie woogie and stuff like that. Stuff like Benny Goodman and this piano player, Freddie Slack. And my mom, she's always dug real rhythmic music like that, and I think that probably influenced me from the time I was real young. Maybe it would subconsciously influence me, something I never did realize. Anyway, before George Smith, I'd say that was my influences there. And then you wanted me to make a comment on Sonny Boy Williamson, Rice Miller, you know. And I think you're right. It was Sonny Boy's delivery, and just the way he delivered his blues. He wasn't no technician, but man, his delivery, be hard to beat that dude's delivery. I mean, a real soulful, sound like it's coming from his heart, you know. And I think that's what Sonny Boy had going for him. He had so many ideas for lyrics, man, it's just crazy, you know. But I would say his delivery, what he had going for him over many other harp players. And then Big Walter Horton, he's always been one of my favorites. I just think Big Walter is great. I mean, what a tone, man, you know. He just never got the breaks as some of the other guys, and maybe his vocals wasn't quite as good, and that might have held him back. I'm not sure what did, but it's a shame he never got further, you know. George Smith used to tell me when he was in Chicago in the 50s, he thought Big Walter was better than Little Walter. That's what he told me. And he was there to see it all, you know. So anyway, that's a few comments on those two guys.
Most experts claim that the late George Harmonica Smith pretty well defined the West Coast harp sound, and I guess you'd say he laid the groundwork for what I believe, is now the hottest blues sound going, the West Coast sound. I think that's where it's really happening blues-wise. I'm really sorry that I'm not located anywhere near you so I could hear the stuff that y'all are doing live. I really feel like I miss so much, but at least I keep up with the LPs, and I do make tape trades with people who sometimes get live concerts of y'all, and anything like that I can pick up I always consider a real helpful thing for my collection. So anyway, since he is pretty well ascribed to having laid all that groundwork, would you pretty much agree with that assessment? And also maybe describe your relationship with him a bit.
Well, I would agree with that. I think that George Smith did lay the groundwork for later harp players out here on the West Coast. George was always a real friendly guy. I mean, now this cat would help anybody. I seen him let other harp players on the stage that could barely play. And when they get finished, this guy would give them all kinds of encouragement, and man, we need more people like that. He had been out here on the West Coast for a long time. From the late 50s, he'd been out here. And he was a big inspiration to many, many people, especially in this area. And I would like to think he's inspired people around the world, He had that chromatic style that, to me, was the greatest of all time, As far as the relationship between me and George Smith, it was a real close one. Let me backtrack a little bit for you here. When I was a teenager growing up here in Los Angeles, I mean, George Smith to me was a harmonica giant. He was up until the day he died, and his music lives on records. He's still a giant, but man, I really looked up to this guy. I would go see him. They had clubs around town, and I would go see him all through my teenage years, I was always afraid to talk to this dude. I would tell him, hey, man, you sure sound good, little things like that, but I never really went up and struck up a long conversation with him. But all through my teenage years, I really dug George Smith. I just thought he was the greatest, Well, I got to be a little bit older, and in 1977, my band was playing down at Shaky Jake Harris had a nightclub by this time. It was called the Safari Club, and it was all blues. And I was featured there with his band. I was the featured guy. Shaky Jake and All Stars featuring Bill Clarke. Well, we were in there playing one night, and the band was sounding okay, And I look over towards the door, and man, here comes George Smith, walk right in this door, and he sat out there and listened to us, and afterwards I went up, and by this time I wasn't afraid to talk to him, I had a little bit of confidence. So I told him, I said, George, why don't you come on up and play with the band? I said, man, you could do anything you want to. You can play all night with these guys if you want to. I'm just going to leave it up to you. Well, George had been in retirement. He hadn't been playing music too much for the 2 years before that, something like 2 years. But he came up and played with my band, and man, I feel like I was in heaven, Jeez, here's George Smith playing with my band. I just felt like a king. So that went really good, and he started coming around that club and sitting in with us kind of regular. I got his phone number. Well, I called him up, and I asked him if he would come and do a gig with me in the west side of L.A. Man, George says, man, I'd be glad to. I'll be there, So he did the gig, and I thought it went real well, and we started working pretty steady together, kind of like as a team, Sometimes we would play together on the bandstand. Sometimes we wouldn't. He would do his thing. I would work kind of like as the MC, bringing him on and off, and all the time trying the best I could to absorb the things that he was doing that I wasn't hip to, And a few years passed. I've got 2 kids. My youngest is named Willie. He became the godfather of my son. So that shows you how close we became after a few years passed by. Man, what a nice guy. This guy was a real gentleman, real sincere guy, willing to help anybody, and he really helped me. And I feel real glad to have known him. I mean, he was a friend of my family's. I just can't say enough good things about George Smith. I think you can see what I'm talking about.
Okay. Now, another thing on George, I always felt that George, in a more technical sense, had what I would call a laconic, laid-back style of harp playing. He was I would say subtle, maybe even subtly devastating. He really was effective. I'm not trying to insinuate that he wasn't effective on harp. He was, but he was just a very slow, laid-back type of player, and that contrasts a great deal with the more aggressive style that I'm used to hearing now from yourself, from, say, your label mate James Harmon, and many other current players. So I would kind of like you to kind of contrast that for me, and maybe if you want to go into a little more technical explanation of the differences in style, that would be fine too.
You're right. George Smith did have kind of a laid-back way of playing. George felt real strong about not overplaying. Matter of fact, he told me when he was younger, I think he was real young, maybe real early 20s, he played with a group of musicians that, man, they just gave him hell for overplaying and playing too many notes. And that was probably something that stuck in his mind, because he told me about that many times over the years. I think it really stuck in his mind because he really knew how to use notes effectively, just very few notes, And he really drilled that into me. He said, "Bill, you're playing too much, man." And I'm glad I paid attention, because I really believe that myself. I mean, there's just no reason to play, all kinds of notes when you can just play a couple and it gets the job done. You do it with taste. Your notes don't all run together. You make more sense. And that was a real good lesson I learned from George. He really drilled that into my head, and man, I thank him for that. His style, I could tell you something about his chromatic. I don't know if even interested in this actually, but the sound that he would get on the chromatic, it was by playing two notes at the same time, but in different octaves, if you know what I'm talking about. He would block out all the notes in between and just hit those two, like say, a C in one octave on one side of the harp, block out all the ones in between. Then also, he'd play the C note in a higher octave. Those blended together would give George that distinctive sound. And he's the only guy, or the earliest example I know of in blues, to ever play octaves like that. And he was really, in my mind, a pioneer for that kind of a style. Now, as far as it being different the way he played and I play, and James Harmon, you'd have to ask James Harmon what his reasoning is. Mine is, I like to have my own style, and I really dig energetic shows, and I like to stir up a crowd. So what I do is I take all the things that I've learned, and a lot of my lessons from George Smith, all that knowledge I got filed away in my brain, and I combine that with my thing, and then it comes out me, because I don't like copiers, man. We got too many copiers in the world, We need more originators. I mean, more, someone's got some originality about them. So if there's a difference in styles, hey, man, thank you, because I want there to be a difference. I try to use all the lessons I learned from him and other people, though, to good effect. As far as Charlie Musselwhite's influence out here on the West Coast, to be honest with you, I'd have to say he's probably been a bigger influence on most people out here than George Smith ever was. George Smith was never on a big label, and Charlie Musselwhite was. And Charlie Musselwhite was real popular out here all through the 60s and early 70s, and he was heard by many people. And he really didn't influence me very much. I think he's a fine harmonica player, but didn't influence me very much because I was listening to Junior Wells, Big Walter Horton, and George Smith, especially in those days. But further north of Los Angeles, around San Francisco, he influenced a lot of people up there, especially like Robin Ford had a band called the Charles Ford Band, His brother was a harp player in that group. His name was Mark Ford. And I think you can hear a lot of Charlie Musselwhite in his playing. Also, Paul Butterfield was a big influence out here. Once again, I never really liked Paul Butterfield's sound. I mean, I could appreciate the technical side of it. Just to me, I didn't hear too much soul in his playing, you know. I mean, you got to remember that, once again, I was having drilled into my head, Bill, take your time, you know, make your notes count. Butterfield was doing the opposite, man. He just played a lot of notes, you know. And I was never a big fan of that kind of thing. You need to take your time, you know. Charlie Musselwhite has become a real good friend of mine. We're really good friends now. And I want to tell you that he's playing real good, better than he has in years. He's doing real good. He's starting to tour all around with his own group once again. For a few years there, he would just fly into this city and that city and work with the house band. But now he has his own group, and he has that great Chicago drummer, Sam Lay, in the drummer seat. So anyhow, and I want to add this now. Charlie Musselwhite is a great, great person. I mean, he's a true gentleman, a real Southern gentleman. And we're very good friends. I have a lot of respect for Charlie Musselwhite.
I know, for example, that you worked with Big Mama Thornton. And I'd like to know, just for the heck of it, maybe you could get into this a little bit. What was it like working with the woman who I would say must have been the leading blues woman of her day? And I also happen to know that Mama herself blew a bit of harp. What type of player was she? I'm be honest with you, I've got her playing harp on the Arhoolie LPs that she did, and she sounds reasonably good. And I also would be honest with you, I don't think I've ever heard any other female in the blues play harp. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's more common than I realize, but she's the one that comes to mind, and she's the only one that comes to mind. So I thought you might want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's true that I played with Big Mama Thornton a little bit, but to tell you the truth, not very many times. I think only about twice, something like that, you know. Yeah, she played harmonica, kind of laid back, you know. I believe she was from Texas. And it always kind of reminded me of Junior Parker's way of playing. It was kind of like almost in the same vein. I think Junior Parker was a little bit better, in my opinion, than Big Mama Thornton. But Junior Parker was a great singer now. But Big Mama, yeah, she sounded good. I know she cut that one thing on an Arhoolie record with Big Walter Horton. It's a harmonica duet. And man, that thing just knocks me out. I think both of them are playing great on there. As a person, Big Mama was kind of bossy, you know. She liked to boss people around. It's kind of weird deal, you know. She would dress up in men's suits. And I'll tell you one thing, she ain't nobody that you'd want to mess with. Because, man, she'd fight you just like a man, you know. I'm glad that I never got into it with her. I seen her stop shows at festivals. And, man, just bawl everybody out right there on the bandstand. I mean, really, put them down, you know. That's a negative side of things, you know, and I don't really go for that too much. But I did play with her briefly a couple times. And she was, in my opinion, a real laid-back player. There's another lady blues lady, that also played harmonica, not in my area. John Brim's wife, Grace Brim, I believe she played drums and harmonica. Not too much on records, though. But that's another one that I know of. I think you might be right, there ain't very many. And Big Mama is definitely probably the most well-known, you know, that was a harmonica player. So that's a little bit of my thoughts on Big Mama, you know. She was real hard driving, you know. George Smith played with Big Mama Thornton for a long time. Man, he told me when he got done, he played with her something like 10 years. He says after he got all that situation, man, he was a nervous wreck. So anyhow, that's a little bit on Big Mama Thornton.
Also, in terms of people that you've backed up, I happen to have a video of a show where your band, including Hollywood Fats, is backing up Smokey Wilson. This took place at the Belly Up Tavern in Solano Beach, and the show was on a PBS broadcast. It was called 3 Generations of the Blues. John Lee Hooker was presented as the so-called old man of the blues, Smokey Wilson, the moderate or intermediate, and then the young pup, Robert Cray, was the third of the three generations. I don't know how aware artists are of these things, whether you actually see them yourself or whether it was, shown in your area. I don't know much about that, but basically, what was your memory of this show? Do you remember anything particular about it? Due to the fact that it's the only time I've actually seen anything live on you, even though you're the backing band. I thought it was interesting just to have it in my collection, and I thought you might have some particular memories of that.
Yeah, the three generations of the blues show that was on the Belly Up, I do have a copy of that. I really had a good time doing that. Really a lot of fun. That wasn't my band, though. If you check out the personnel on the band, it's really the Hollywood Fats Band with Al Blake gone and Larry Taylor. He's gone. So that's the Hollywood Fats Band without Larry Taylor on the bass and without Al Blake on the harmonica. The bass player that's on there, man, what was his name? Jerry Smith is on the bass. That's actually the Hollywood Fats Band original bass player. And of course, you put me there on the harp. I always been real close with Smokey. And that Hollywood Fats Band, in my mind, out of the last 15 years, it's got to be the best band, man, from this area anyway. I mean, I was a big fan of that band, so it was really a lot of fun for me to do a video with them, And Smokey Wilson, he's a Mississippi cat, He's been out here since, I guess, real early 70s. And he plays down in the ghetto area, L.A. here, and he had his club for a long, long time, the Pioneer Club. And I became his band leader for about 6 months down there. I think that was about 1976, maybe, around that time. So I got to know his music pretty good. So when it come time to do that video, they called me up and wanted me to go on down and do it. As far as memories on it, I don't know. I just remember having a real good time, and it was a pleasure, playing with Hollywood Fats. And I remember Smokey was all excited, and they told us not to wear no white and black, I believe. I think Smokey showed up in all white. It was kind of funny at the time. I'm not sure if he changed his clothes later or not, but Smokey's kind of a funny dude, He's a real good blues artist. By the way, my current band, recorded an album with Smokey Wilson. And we shopped it around here to some U.S. companies like Alligator and those, but I think it might be a little bit too down home for them. So I contacted a company called Black Magic in Europe, and now it's supposed to come out on a CD, Smokey Wilson with the William Clarke Blues Band. It's supposed to be issued in July. So that might be something you keep your eyes peeled for, as long as they ship some over here. I believe they will. But the three generations of the blues, it was a good time for me, to be around John Lee Hooker and Robert Cray and them. I believe that was before Robert Cray made it real big. But that was a good experience for me.
In the same vein, speaking of Hollywood Fats, I was really impressed with the PBR International LP that he put out. As far as I know, it was the only LP he ever got out, but it's a fine record. I don't know whether you've heard it or not. I would imagine you probably have. I'd like to get into Fats just a little bit, if we could. I know that you played with him for a fairly good while. I'd just like to get some ideas on what all went on between you. When did you meet him? How long did he play with you in your band? And I was also a little curious, I know the PBR LP was released in '79. Now, he played with you, again, I don't know what years, and he also played with your label mate James Harmon for a number of years. Neither of you played the harp on the LP. I believe Al Blake, if I'm not mistaken, was the harp player on that LP. And I was curious why neither of you were on the LP. Perhaps that was before either of you had met him. You might fill me in on that.
Well, one thing about the Hollywood Fats Band album, that was the Hollywood Fats Band That was a self-contained unit. Al Blake was part of that band. Me and James Harmon both knew Hollywood Fats when they cut that. We had our own things going, you know. Al Blake, I think, is a good harp player. I always dug his stuff. I first met Hollywood Fats. He was in Shaky Jake Harris's band for a long time. I think about 4 years, something like that. And I met Fats by hanging around Shaky Jake. I met Fats maybe in 1969 and 1970. Fats was really, really dedicated to blues. I mean, this guy, I remember going to clubs in the area. I was a couple years older than him. I would see this dude, man. In the early days, he had real long hair, man. It looked kind of funny. It looked kind of like Tiny Tim or something. But, man, this dude, he must have been like 13, 14 years old, and I'd see him down front watching all these country blues guys. I mean, just staring at them, just really, really intense, you know. A few years later, I found out that he quit school. Now, this is how much this guy really dug blues at an early age. He quit school. He moved in with Shaky Jake. And his father would send checks over there to Shaky Jake's house so Shaky could feed him. And, you know, Fats was big, and I'm sure he's eating up a lot of the food over there. So anyway, this cat was a real, real dedicated blues musician. I think for about, he lived over there, I don't know, 2 years, something like that. He played with Shaky even after he left there, but really, really dedicated, you know. Hollywood Fats was never in my band. We did gigs together sometimes. He's on my first album, and I think that Hollywood Fats is just a great, great player. Like I said earlier in this interview, that was my favorite L.A. band, and actually still is. I mean, great, great players. They really knew how to play together and complement each other, make everybody sound good. In the mid-'70s, I wasn't playing then as much as I am now, and every chance that I could get, I would go down, me and my wife, and check the band out. I mean, we drove 50 miles, man, to see that band many times, you know. And, matter of fact, I used to tape them quite a bit, so I've got a lot of live tapes on that band, man, and the stuff sounds just as good now as it did, 10 years ago. And I don't know, the Hollywood Fats band was a great, great band. I still play on my recordings with their old piano player, Fred Kaplan. He's a great piano player also. And I really miss old Fats. You know, he was a real big influence here on the L.A. scene. A lot of people really loved his playing a lot.
Now, getting back a little bit here to you and staying away from your little sidelines there of playing with others and so on, I'd like to ask the 1983 Watchdog release, Can't You Hear Me Calling. What was the reason for your pursuing a reissue of that record? I could be wrong, but I have read that there is a track difference on the reissue, that Rivera has a couple of songs that wasn't on the original or something to that effect. I don't know what the real story on that is. I hope you could fill me in on that. And also, I could be wrong, but my understanding of it is that trying to get the LP reissued is what led to your meeting up with Bob Rivera. If that's the true circumstances, I'd like you to confirm that, or just kind of go into a little detail about what did happen to get you interested first off in the reissue of that LP and to connect you up with Bob.
Well, yeah, you're right. The Can't You Hear Me Calling LP was originally on the Watchdog label. Well, the Watchdog label belonged to a friend of mine named Joe Lodovici. And another thing, it did have two tunes on that the reissue didn't have. The original one had an instrumental called Willie's Walk, which was named after my son Willie. And it also had a tune, Diggin' My Potatoes, which was actually on my first LP, Hittin' Heavy, on Shaky Jake's label. So they took off Willie's Walk and Diggin' My Potatoes, and they put on Ice Cream Man, and then a new instrumental, West Coast Walk, with featuring the great piano playing of Fred Kaplan and Joel Foy on guitar, along with myself. Well, what had happened, my friend Joe had some problems with the law, so he had to go do some time in jail. Also around that same time, it was his record company, Watchdog. Around that same time, he needed some money real bad. Well, the record really wasn't doing much because he was gone. So I could see it was going out of print, pretty soon. And I really dug the record. I thought it was a good record. I think I can do better now. I have done better, but I think that's a good record. So Bob Rivera, he came to a couple of my live shows, and this was a nice guy. I mean, I was thinking, man, this dude is really nice, for being a label owner. He had Rivera Records. He already had the record by the Tomcats had come out already. So, man, my brain starts kicking into gear, and I'm thinking, well, maybe this guy would want to reissue my record on his label. Give me a little bit of bread up front. It would help me and my partner, Joe. I could get Joe some money, help him out of his little jam. For myself, it would put the album back in print. And Bob, I mean, he seemed to enjoy my band, and I thought that he might get a kick out of having one of my records on his label. So, yeah, we talked about it and decided to do that. And Bob, I agree with you. Bob is a great guy. I mean, they don't come much nicer than Bob. I mean, he's a really, really nice guy. I mean, this guy, he bends over backwards for me to try to help me out of situations, and I consider him a real, real great friend. I mean, Bob is just a nice guy. Well, right around the time that me and Bob Rivera agreed to reissue Can't Hear Me Calling on his album, he started talking about maybe the possibility of cutting my band live, doing a live record. Well, one thing led to another, and we did do that live record. It came out as Rockin' the Boat. We cut it at the Starboard Attitude, which is a place here in Los Angeles, right down by the ocean, that I play at. I play there a lot. I've been playing there total of maybe 15 years, went through 3 owners, but I'm still there every now and then when I'm in town. There's other places I play here, but that's always a real fun place to play. And when I'm in town, I'm usually down there on a Saturday night doing that. So that's true. That's really how we got together. Bob Rivera, he came down to the Starboard Attitude, matter of fact, and we kind of met there. Then we started talking about the possibility of reissuing Can't Hear Me Calling. Then after that, we started talking about maybe doing a live album. And then through all this time period, we became real close. And we're still close today. I have a lot of respect for Bob Rivera.
Getting back to your relation with Bob, have you enjoyed the situation? What is your relationship with Rivera Records in general? I know Bob was a contractor originally and that he's not really per se in the music business, or hadn't been. So I just kind of wondered, had you enjoyed the relationship with the label, and is it all working out well for you? Also, Bob, to me, he just seems, he's a lot like me. He seems like a really genuine type fella that just happens to love the blues. And maybe I'm wrong, but I would assume that he is probably, with that in mind, a little easier to work with. I would assume that, for example, in the studio, he would give an artist a fairly free rein to turn in the type performance that he feels he would be most proud of, the real blues setting, so to speak. Would you say that that is true? And if so, or if not, for that matter, maybe you could contrast the type feeling that you get working in the Rivera label as opposed to some of the experiences that you may have had trying to get other LPs released on other labels, other recording circumstances, so to speak.
Well, like I said about a minute ago, Bob Rivera is a great guy. He's a great guy to work with. He gives me all kinds of room to develop my own material, perform it like I want to, and he really loves the real blues, He don't want no bullshit, He likes that strong stuff, and so do I. He gives me a free rein, and you can't ask for no more than that. As far as bigger labels and that, I've never been on a big label. I'd love to be, though. I'm really happy being on Bob's label. I've worked as a sideman behind people on bigger labels, and yeah, they really try to control what's going on. They don't give you a free hand, and they seem to always be thinking about some kind of hit. They want it to sound commercial to sell, So then they dilute the sound. It's not so strong a sound, and I don't dig that at all. Bob gives you a lot of room to just do it right, and that's, in my mind, that's the only way to do it.
Now, another thing, we have a local band around here who they play at a they play at a bar in Cincinnati called Corey's. Not that that means anything to you, but anyway, they were called the Phil Blank Blues Band, and I think that might be the name they're still going under. Anyway, Phil is someone I happen to enjoy a great deal, and his bio lists that he played with you, Shaky Jake, and Hollywood Fats, among others, during a fairly lengthy sojourn that he had on the West Coast. He apparently was out there for several years before coming back and relocating here in the hometown, and I happen to really enjoy his music. I was just curious, since you're listed, do you remember Phil? Do you remember playing with him? What do you think of him as a player? He was, at one time, a guitarist. I don't know if he was playing guitar when he was on the coast. That I can't say. I do know that he is now playing harmonica and is a pretty decent player, I think. So, kind of to keep a local flavor alive in the interview, I was just curious what reaction you might have on Phil, assuming that you do remember him.
Yeah, I do remember Phil. I believe I met him down there at Shaky Jake's club, the Safari Club, and he would sit in with us there. And I also remember another time he sat in with us when I was with George Smith. It was at a different club. And I think I did a live radio broadcast with him one time, and the Hollywood Fats band was also there. I remember that. And yeah, Phil, he was a good player. I remember him. I haven't heard him in years now. That's been a long, long time ago. And I hope he's doing good there, I haven't seen him in a long while. There's one thing, ain't no big deal, but I loaned him a record, and I sure would like to have it back. It was T-Bone Walker's Two Bones and a Pick. And actually, I bought it from a friend of mine, and then I loaned it to Phil. And I ain't really mad about it or nothing, but I never got that record back, and it's a completely out-of-print record. So you might want to mention that to him if you see him. That's about all I really got to say about him. He seemed to be a good singer and a good harp player too, and I hope he's doing good back there.
Do you consider yourself a second-generation blues artist? Now, what I mean by that, you're influenced, and directly influenced, I should say, by some of the real masters of the blues themselves. I mean, it's not like, that you were 20 years old and you ran out and you bought a Junior Wells LP and you never ever saw or met any of the greats. You just sat at home and learned it. I mean, you've had contact with George Smith for years, I know, and, I'm sure many others. Shaky Jake you had a relationship with, and, probably many others. I call that a second-generation blues artist in that you are directly influenced and directly played with the originators of this sound and style. I personally enjoy first or second generation blues myself. Now, what I'd also like to question you on, I have a little bit of difficulty with what I call third generation bluesmen. I don't know if you see it that way. Do you see a significant difference between a second or third generation bluesman? My definition of a third-generation bluesman basically would be someone who wasn't influenced by any of the black artists. Would be, for example, if he was a guitarist, rather than being influenced directly by Freddie King and Otis Rush and B.B. King and Albert and people like that, he listened to Eric Clapton, who was influenced by those folks and used Eric for a takeoff point. To me, by the time that happens, you're talking a lot of times about a fairly serious dilution of the blues feel, of the blues genre, if you will. Some of these people carry it off fairly effectively. Some, it becomes a rather embarrassing procedure. as I said, do you see a difference there, or is this something that's just an opinion of mine? Is it a significant issue at all? What do you think?
Well, I think you're right. First of all, I think that to be a blues man, I think that you have to learn it firsthand, you know. I think blues is a tradition that's passed down from generation to generation. And you need to get all the way inside that blues, you know. Blues is my lifestyle. I live this shit, you know. This ain't something I just do when I get on the bandstand. I believe in it. It's almost like a religion to me. Blues is about truth. Facts of life, you know. Blues is about everyday things. Ain't no kind of bullshit, you know. It's real. I learned my blues firsthand from guys like Shaky Jake Harris, George Smith. I played with many guys over the years, you know. I believe this is the only way to learn about blues. You mentioned people that listen to like British blues, English blues, and that. Well, see, I don't like British blues. I only like American blues. To me, that's authentic blues. They have a little bit different way of playing and singing that I don't really enjoy it at all. I'm proud of being American. I'm proud of American blues, and to me, that's it right there. You know, I learned my blues firsthand. I think anyone that wants to play blues needs to learn it firsthand. You just can't sit home with the record player and get it all like that. You can get the technical side of it. Blues is deeper than that. So, anyway, I hope that response is okay for you. Keith, I'm going to flip this tape over, man. It's getting kind of low on tape.